Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Alistair Henry, the Chief Scientific Officer of UCB, to talk about his amazing 26-year journey with the company. He talks about his excitement and challenges of the work he's doing right now, the importance of looking ahead and maintaining a focus on the whole market, how he balances immediate priorities with long-term innovation, and some honest and practical advice for those starting out in their scientific careers. This week, I am back on Careers in Discovery with Alistair Henry of UCB. Alistair, welcome to the show.
Welcome as well. I'm glad to be here, Tom. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity.
Of course. No, really looking forward to talking all about your career. I'm very intrigued. We always start with a little bit of context, Alistair, and a little bit about what you're up to now. So, having recently been appointed Chief Scientific Officer there at UCB, tell us a bit about where the company is at, what you're up to, where you're spending your time, all of that kind of thing.
Well, I've been at UCB a long time.
Yes.
I've been there for 26 years. So UCB is not new to me, but it's a really exciting time for us as a company. We've had the launches that we transacted all of last year and into this year, which have made a big difference for us. It is again, the statements of where we are as an organization in immunology and in neurology. And these are our growth areas, and these are areas of real scientific excitement and patient impact. I mean, that's what drives us, is the patients that we serve, the patients that are the focus for what we do. And it's great to continually bring, to the market and of course to the patient, innovative solutions to meet unmet need. And we're at a really exciting time, and it's a matter of public disclosure. We not only have molecules that we've launched, but of course we have molecules that sit in the pipeline for which there will be critical data over this, the next 12, 18 months, which continue that trend. And of course we don't know the outcome of those data, but it's a pipeline that we are also genuinely excited about, and be able to continue to build strength in both our neurology and our immunology portfolios.
Yes.
And that's a really, for me to come into this role at this point, I come at an exciting time, but also a challenging time for me personally. How do you build on success? It's great to be in a place where of success, but how to build on success and how to build for the next round and the next, the future that sits ahead of us. It's not tomorrow that counts; it's 10 years that count. And so that's the challenge, and that's the thing that I'm really looking forward to. And of course, whilst I'm not a stranger to the company. Of course, this is my first CSO role,
right?
And of course, therefore, I'm also learning. It's a continuing learning journey, and strategic conversations at a different level than I have had previously, with different interactions with the organization than I have had previously, and I find that also personally very exciting.
Yes,
not just corporately for the company, but for me, it's my continual development, my continual learning journey of what makes hopefully makes me a more interesting, more rounded individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested, Alistair. We've had lots of CSOs on the show from different stages of companies, from startups where some of them are still in the lab and running experiments, through to larger companies. At a company the size of UCB, then, what's the balance of your role as Chief Scientific Officer? How much of it is on the current pipeline? How much is on the future? How much is on the corporate stuff? How does that all tend to work?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a really great question. So, balance. Yes, there is, of course, a reasonable amount of that time on the current pipeline, because those are the immediate decisions, and those are the things that we transact now and into the relative short-term future. But actually, quite a significant amount of my time is about beyond that, because we sow the seeds now for them, and we cannot pushing that analogy one step further, can't wait to sow the seeds. You can't wait too long.
Yes.
And so quite a fair amount of time is spent on the beyond the next few years. It's the 5+ year horizon that we all need to be occupied. I need to be occupied with.
Yeah.
Whilst it may be a bit of a horrible word, but what will be my legacy
Absolutely.
at that point? I clearly will not be here forever. It's a statement of truth, but it's what you leave behind, the map,
Yeah.
and how we plan for that. So yeah, there's a significant amount of the much more the longer distance rather than the immediate.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even amidst all the sort of clinical programs and all that kind of thing that are happening, you're still very connected to the early research and the new programs that are coming through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, Alistair, that you've been with UCB for some time, and I want to talk about that journey through the company, because I think it's interesting to have gone through the business and stayed with it and had that longevity. I want to go back a bit further than that, first of all.
Yeah.
And I'm always really interested in where people's careers kind of originate from, I suppose. So for you, why science, first of all? Why, I believe it was immunology in the first place, and why drug development? Why this path for you, do you think?
So one thing is really clear. I didn't set off to end up in pharma.
Right.
I didn't set off to end up as CSO.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the science piece come from? Let's go right back to the beginning. I think I've been always naturally curious
Yes.
about how does the world work?
Yes.
The why question. The why question. Why is it like that? Why does it behave like that? And that's been always a natural curiosity. So I think I had a science, almost a science track from early teenage. But I couldn't have expressed that to you as was that biology, was that physics? I couldn't have expressed it as drug discovery or whatever. But the curiosity of why does that work? And in fact, that still is in my head. Even gadgets I take apart. Why does that work? Even today. And then of course, back, and of course, talking the 1980s. I mean, I'm of an age. If you were sort of moderately bright, what were your options? Law or medicine? Well, you can guess which one I was channeled towards.
Yes.
Was medicine. And then I did my A levels, what have you. And back in those days, where you got the points for under the UCA system of the university system, I missed med school by 1 point.
Wow.
And it was that frustration moment, but probably for me, quite frankly, a lucky break. It was the relief, because that was the year. Because in those olden days, your university application was not digital. It was not online. It was on paper, based on a book that recorded all of the courses. And if the course was not in the book, then effectively the course did not exist.
Right.
And on that year, they omitted the immunology course at King's.
Okay.
And they were undersubscribed. And we had a family friend who had a friend who was in fact a senior lecturer at King's. That was the connection. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this.
Yes.
And that was my introduction to immunology.
Interesting.
So you could argue that I'm a failed medic, or you could argue that it's a relief for generations of patients that have been spared my tender cares. Or perhaps my view of it is, what an opportunity to suddenly find actually what I was really interested in.
Yes.
Was the fundamental science.
Yes.
And I did my degree, but I took a year out. In the middle of it, I did an extramural year at the Kennedy Institute for rheumatology. It was then in West London before it moved out to Oxford. Right. And I had that year in research, which was just so much fun. And on B-cell lineages and B-cell development, I still remember it. And I had for me, that was a real eye-opener. And what it actually meant to do real research with real materials, not contrived experiments, devising it yourself. How valid was it? Building the hypotheses, et cetera, and really doing that. And for me, light bulb moment. And my
Yes.
final year project, I even got a paper out, my first paper out of my final
Fantastic.
year project. You're sort of ticking boxes in your head. I'm thinking, I'm really quite enjoying this.
Yes.
And so that got me to the end of that period. And then I was really lucky again. And that was, I got my PhD position with Professor Hannah Gould at King's, who was looking for somebody who was at least a token immunologist to join the Department of Biophysics at King's.
Yes.
And that again was one of those moments where I joined a team which was absolutely phenomenal. So Hannah Gould and Brian Sutton was part of that pair. They were my co-supervisors for my PhD, and that moved me more towards biophysics at a time when a lot of people go into molecular biology.
Yes.
At that
Yeah.
moment, and in fact, one of the big pieces of advice I got was that will one day be quite, that'll be in kits. Correct. It almost all is now,
Yes.
But they'll always come back to a biophysicist at some point. That was a very far-reaching statement. I think that was Walter Gratzer in the department then, and I took that on board, and it took me down structural biology and the whole explanation of how systems, how those systems work,
Yes.
allosteric mechanisms. Well, at this point, you see, I was having a whale at the time. And a lot of it was around allergy, the IgE, mechanisms of IgE and allergy. So, because there was a connection back to patients at that point. This was the real problem. I mean, food allergy is a real problem, and really trying to address those questions. And it really opened, my eyes to so much of that. So, of course, I did my PhD. I stayed on my postdoc, and I postdoced again. And after 10 years have gone by, and you get to that critical moment. What next? Is it tenure? Or is it leave?
Right.
And I went to biotech, cell tech.
Yes.
And I joined cell tech. And I joined them to work on small molecule programs, but really developing technologies, developing ways of screening, physical screening, of course, and to be involved in my first ever drug discovery programs.
Yeah.
Of which actually we did end up with molecules that made it into the clinic. That was exciting in and of its own right. But the eye opener to me of what drug development and drug hunting meant. Now I put a separation between drug development and drug hunting. I really wasn't drug development. It was the idea of what could you spot.
Okay.
What really meant what was a molecule that would be a drug.
Yes, I see.
And the essence of that was the learning journey, which I did several cycles of. And I was involved in both small molecule and large molecule programs. Again, I took one of these sort of sideways, I won't call it sideways step, but developing some of the structural biology capabilities for the organization, planning its protein biochemistry capabilities, its screening capabilities, a real opportunity to develop things, build teams and then sort of almost like leave them and start something else and move in different areas and in touching either technologies or programs. And of course, I ended up more and more linked with projects. And in fact, more and more with projects, I was more and more interested in that piece of, okay, so what does it take to get this to the clinic?
Yes.
That becomes a bigger and bigger driver. And of course, what I'm trying to compress at this point is quite a lot of years. But the learning of more and more thinking this can impact, this could impact, how to get there quicker, how to get there better, and really wanting, and of course, I was involved in projects that got to the clinic, got through to registration, actually, so success. And whilst I didn't lead them in the latter stage, I was very much involved in their early stage. And of course, that feeds this almost insatiable appetite for wanting to see that again.
Yes.
And so, I suppose 8 years ago, something like that now, I got asked, would I take on now the whole of their platforms? The small molecule, large molecule platforms, and the structural biology, the CAD functions as well, as an entity, and as a responsibility for the whole organization. And that then, of course, gave me, I was now in multiple programs.
Hmm.
It didn't matter whether it was small or large molecule. UCB has got both of those, and probably what I should say is somewhere in the middle of all that conversation, UCB bought Celtech.
Right. Yes, of course.
So we were acquired 20 years ago. So it was 2004.
Yeah.
And that acquisition was getting critical. Brought to that biotech company that was at the mercy of the fluctuations of the stock market, frankly, as a company. Stability from a much larger company, which is largely family owned, a much more stable financial environment, and that was really a real key moment. And that in the acquisition, UCB allowed Celtech to continue, not in the sort of the Roche Genentech model of keeping the name, but leaving the innovative, not trying to make it, put the stamp of UCB in that sense, but really allow it to flourish within the UCB environment, being part of UCB. That was a very important, cultural element, and it continued to grow. And I continued to, my own personal development. I'm now, as that journey goes on, of course, I'm now responsible for platforms.
Yes.
And of course, therefore, touching all the programs, whether immunology or neurology, small or large molecule, and to really be part of seeing more programs come to success.
Yes.
Again, and it's constantly feeding in my own mind of how can we continuously do this and do it better? Can we be faster, smarter? Yeah, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's time that it takes to get to patients. This is now the driver. So when I started off as perhaps truly patient-centric, and I need to be really frank about that, I was very science-centric. I trace over my career a shift from being science-centric but patient-motivated.
Okay.
And really that piece of, the quality of the science has to remain. It is an absolute. But now the patient voice, if you like, at multiple levels becomes a real pull.
Yeah, I see.
Of how you impact these people. And I told colleagues, the story of actually, my children are grown up now. University, one of them coming home for a weekend with a friend who was actually on a UCB medication. And that moment of this person saying, well, you know what, this has changed my life.
Right.
I have nothing to do with that medication. I can claim nothing other than the inspiration it gives back.
Yes.
Which is to think it is possible to influence the lives of people to that degree. And thinking, you know what is there not to like about that? In a real simple way. And the big driver then, that's the constant driver, the impact that we can make in society.
Yes.
Through the research, the science, the great science that we do. We have to collaborate, of course. It's not just internal activities, it's external. You build networks and so on and so forth. But that's the thing that is, we are impacting society.
Yes.
For good.
And at what point in your career do you think that started to become clear to you, do you think? Because as you said, you started very scientifically focused, as I think most scientists do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was sort of maybe a progression. I'm sure it wasn't just one day you were science focused and the next you were more patient focused. But do you remember where that started to really take shape?
I think it's when I was more and more involved with projects when we got closer to the clinic. And the question of, if you're serious about putting this into a person,
yes,
the things that, of course, there's of course the safety and so on and so forth that you need to be very cognizant of. But you realize now that was where the dialogue, the conversations of, what will the incremental change in that person's disease will be? What is the depth of that response? How long will it last? How meaningful is that over their standard of care? What difference are we making? Really making? And is the investment that we're proposing commensurate with the difference that we will make? Because if we cannot understand that, then or indeed we fear that it's quite small.
Right.
Should we be doing it at all? Is there even an ethical question around that? Should we be doing that? And that starts to make you think about this whole process from the, if you like, from the eyes of the patient. And that I think is I suppose, sort of almost 10 years into my time, is the moment I'm thinking, this is a bigger pull, becomes a bigger
Yeah.
pull. And the more and more you get closer to the clinic with more and more programs, and then you're in the clinic, that becomes even bigger pull. And then you start to actually hear patients, literally hear patients, who are
Yes.
talking about their disease, their situation, and then even some of them talking about medication, drugs that we have developed and they are on,
Yeah.
and it's a reinforcement of that story constantly coming back. Um, which for me, that's the piece that has just grown, I suppose, probably over the last 15 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Every year, you hear more and more, and you think, that's why I'm doing this.
Yes. Yeah. And how has that then influenced how you think about drug discovery and the very early stage research?
Oh, I think it does definitely have
Yeah.
a number of ways. So um, there's of course the patient's experience, what really is the truth of their disease. I mean,
Right.
and getting an understanding of that, but of course understanding it also the patient at a molecular level. I mean, defining them now molecularly. What are the real drivers molecularly of their disease? How do you differentiate, stratify patients at a
Mm.
molecular level? But of course, the fact of the unmet need, really understanding that unmet need, not just today, but in, if it's an early program, 10 years from now, when your idea could have got to the market will not be tomorrow, it's 10 years. So
Right.
project what their landscape is in 10 years' time and what the standard of care will be at that point. That again, that's constantly what will the patient be at that moment?
Mm.
What will their expectation be at that point in time? So is what we're doing now going to meet that expectation
Yeah.
and meet that need at that moment? And again, these are things that really influence you right at the beginning. Can I define them? Can I actually follow them? Will they actually have that need? Will I actually
Yes.
meet that need? What will that need really actually be at that moment? These, I mean, and that's before you know, we've started anything. These
Yeah.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
that I think really govern what you want to do. And of course, there's
Ye-
another environment to that, which is the payer. What will society be prepared
Yes.
to pay for in 10 years' time? It's
Yeah.
a question, not just what the patient might ask for.
It's interesting. It's kind of that idea, isn't it? The sort of Wayne Gretzky quote of "Let's not go to where the puck is. Let's go to where it's going to be."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but that's a very complex equation on the
yeah,
scale that you're talking about there.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and obviously at UCB you have people who have expertise in forecasting these things and sort of analyzing trends and things like that. Um, if someone's maybe at a smaller company and trying to predict those things and doesn't have the same sort of processes around that, what are kind of key things that you look at in terms of trends to say, okay, well, this is an early program, but actually these are the indications that we think it's worth pursuing? And I appreciate it's going to vary, but are there common themes?
Yeah, we would think about, if you think about whatever that, well, actually, depends how you think about it. Do you think about a disease or do you think about a mechanism?
Okay.
Yeah, and interestingly, think about mechanisms, where would that mechanism play out? And then what other things will play out in the same space?
Mm,
So that sort of helps you define. So if a different mechanism is going to dominate that, then maybe that's not the area for you.
right.
So it's interesting. You can look at it mechanistically. You can of course look at it patient population wise. So what do I actually see that are already in clinical trials
Hmm.
or give an indication? And that we shouldn't fool ourselves. There are plenty of very clever other people out there,
Absolutely. Yeah.
who will find success. So let's not just think that we can rock up late and beat
Mm,
all. So let's also look at that landscape and judge that landscape. Where would we fit within that landscape? What will they have left on the table
yes.
if they are successful?
Yes.
What still remains for the patient at that point? Are we dealing with their symptoms, or are we actually trying to arrive at some sort of cure? Dealing with
Mm,
their symptoms may actually be very, could be transformational for that patient,
absolutely. Yeah.
but it would be also even more so if you got to the same point by a cure.
Yes.
However you want to define cure, drug-free remission. again, these are questions that we would wrestle with early, just to see where would we end up at the end of this journey.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's probably the case that there are some people in early stage biotechs who do think that broadly, but I think a lot of the time there's a very head down focus on this
Yeah,
program, isn't there?
yeah,
And perhaps broadening that
yeah.
that perspective would be worthwhile.
I agree. And of course, of course we do get
Yes,
infused by the piece of science, that novel is,
yes.
that observation that you've made. Why shouldn't we be excited about that? But we need to be equally excited about where
Mm,
it will go. Where will
mm,
that land, 5 or 10 years from now?
yeah,
And that's the big question. It doesn't invalidate the cool observation you've made.
yes.
It will perhaps change the way you will value it in that context, or
Hmm.
maybe even help you modify it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something else you mentioned, Alistair, that I think you kind of mentioned it as something that's always been in your approach, but it was this idea of continually thinking about, well, how do we do this better? How do we do it faster? How do we improve the way we do it? So not just how do we deliver, but how do we deliver better? Is that something that's been with you from the start? Is that kind of in this idea of how do things work, or again, did that develop as you went along?
I think that's developed as I've gone along.
Okay.
Uh, so the curiosity about how does it work, that question is always the how, why type question.
Yeah.
But then think about how can you do this at scale? What if you could have, and again, I suppose, in of course in the brave new world of AI and so on and so forth, whatever we mean by those things, of course, the value of the data,
Yes.
how much the data helps us to predict and to model and so on. So think about how much you can accumulate that data, whether from internal effort or through collaboration and so on, and import it in. That again has been something that I've constantly, that's a bigger and bigger thing that's grown, because of course if I can get to that information quicker,
Mm.
more of it, with less investment, whether in materials and so on, those are things that do drive me.
Yes.
Maybe because then I recognise that I actually don't know very much, but the data knows a lot more than me.
Okay. Yeah.
So the more of that I can interrogate, and with smarter questions,
Mm.
the more I will learn. What does the data teach me? How do I ask the right questions of the data? And being open to what it is saying, and therefore being able to gather enough of that to be framed in the right way, to be able to question in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it strikes me as well that there's a sort of I don't know if this is the right word, but a sort of relentlessness you have to cultivate around that, almost, in that you
Mm,
sort of, when things go well, you want to recognize that, but it's okay, that's
mm.
great. How do we do it better? And that
Yeah,
sort of tirelessness around that is important, right?
yeah. And there's a learning circle. So we did it.
Yes.
Could I have done it better, quicker? What did I learn from that experience, positive and negative? What will I
Hmm.
take to somewhere else, different program? What will I promise I will never do again? Yeah,
Yes.
But if I can't learn from those experiences, um, there's something wrong. Actually, we have
Mm-mm.
to learn from them, to be smarter.
Yeah.
Which decisions would I have made different today from
Yeah.
my
And
experience that I can't go back in the clock, but I can learn from it.
no, and I suppose that's a approach that you can scale, right? Because if you're a scientist delivering experiments hands-on, you can look at the experiment you just did and, okay, how could I have done that better? Whereas if you're running a team, well, how could we have delivered this
Yeah,
piece of work better? If you're looking at a department, or you're running a program, how, it just, the principle doesn't necessarily change, does it? But
yeah,
the scope at which you can apply it
yeah.
changes.
And then how do you set the frameworks for asking those questions?
Yes.
So the
Yeah.
strategy. How do you think about strategy? Actually, what are you? How do you frame that?
Mm.
And move from the what's your vision and your strategy is moving that down, to tactical, operational. But don't start at the bottom. Start at the top of
No, no, no.
that piece, and really think about how you frame that, and frame the framework, if I can
Yes.
put that, for those discussions, because I think you end up with better decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. completely, especially if you're looking at it in that wider context of
Mm.
where, not just where are we going, but where's the world going and where's the
Yeah,
patient going. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Interesting. I was keen as well, Alistair, to talk to you a bit about sort of your longevity at UCB, because it's unusual these days that someone's with a company for 26 years. And I'm sure that some of it is serendipitous, being in the right place, and arriving in the right place early in your, or reasonably early in your career.
Yeah.
Um, but tell us a bit about, I suppose, what's kept you engaged with that? And I'm also interested in, what do you think are the advantages of staying in one place? I know the company's changed, but how has that sort of played out for you?
I think it's a really fascinating question. I mean,
Mm.
and I guess I could frame very flippant answers, which would not be helpful. Was it I was too lazy to move? Yeah. No, my career at UCB has changed a lot.
Right.
So I've moved from very, almost been given freedom very early, explore whatever you like. Yeah, I really that was so. I had early managers who were
Mm.
massively generous in that sense, took risk with me, but said, "Look, here's some parameters. What would you explore?" So I had that opportunity, and whether in technology spaces and so on. Moving then, of course, to a more project related, not project management, but actually still deeply in the science. I mean, I
Right.
only actually finally sort of admitted to myself that I probably couldn't spend any more time in the lab just 7 years ago.
Okay.
So I stayed in the lab right to almost, I wouldn't call it the bitter end, but
They dragged you out.
until they dragged me out and ritually burnt my lab coat and told me I couldn't go back. That's not true. I still have a lab coat and I still have a bench
Yeah.
space. Still have my own Gilsons. But because of course, therefore I changed. I had different roles. I moved into projects, and then I moved to
Mm.
different teams. So I was then leading teams or leading project. Leading transversally, whether leading or down into hierarchical reporting line sense. So again, different leadership skills you're learning
Yes.
in that regard, and then moving to just not just single projects or a couple of projects, but of course over a larger number of projects, different skill set that's being developed, different technologies you have to embrace, operating through people
Hmm.
much more than through just your own efforts, your own hard work. So that's a change. That's change, and that's change again.
Of
And then
course.
I took on the platforms. That's change again for me. It's a different role. And
Yes.
then I got asked to again. We looked at the organisation and said, actually, what we need to bring back together again is some of the platforms with some of the fundamental biology. So I took on the immunology
Mm.
focus area alongside the biologics platforms at the UK research operation. Again, different skill set,
Yeah.
different breadth, having to deal with different questions, and with site management and things like that. So again, a different set of skills, for an organisation. So
Yes.
I would argue that I've actually had internally a series of very different jobs,
Yes.
which I guess I'm sure I could have got if I'd left and moved from one to another in a different way, and I would have got, in that sense, the same
Mm.
types of experiences externally. I guess I've been very lucky to have had those experiences internally,
Yes.
and moved between those different roles and different functions, broadening the experience in all of those, and the challenges, and learning different skills, different dialogue, different stakeholders, um, which I'm sure I could have got that in the outside world.
Yeah.
But why did I stay to get all of that? Well, if you're getting all of that internally, there's sort of an interesting question: is why should you leave? But
Absolutely.
but the other one for me is, I mean, now speaking about UCB very specifically, I love the culture.
Hmm.
A culture of innovation, a culture of open dialogue, a culture where that challenge is required, not merely welcomed, but required. A place where there is, yes, of course, like all organisations, we have an organisational structure, but in
Yep.
practice, it's pretty flat.
Right.
And you can talk to whomever and engage with whoever.
Hmm.
And then, again, these are really quite important things, non-siloed in that regard. I'm sure, is UCB, an utterly perfect place? Well, the simple truth is it isn't, because it's populated with people like me, so that's why it isn't perfect. Yeah. But I love that culture
Yes.
of collaboration, a culture of that is in absolute curiosity, inquisitive,
Yeah.
innovation, push the boundary, but and the culture that is about the challenge, but in the right way.
Yes.
Um, and so I thrived in that, and continue to feel I'm also continuing to grow. I'm now
Yeah.
faced with different challenges that I have to learn about,
Yes.
uh, and it's a continuous development. So that's what you know drives you onwards. Um,
And in those moments of transition, especially when it is very different to what you've been doing before, what have you found for you personally has been the successful way to approach that and to make that transition, learn the new role, immerse yourself in it? How do you manage those transitions typically? And I
uh,
appreciate you going through one right now, so it might be quite fresh in your
yeah,
mind.
exactly. So I think there are two sides to this, Tom. So one is, what are my core values?
Right.
So what defines me? And the transparency, the fact of very openness, the truth matters.
Hmm.
That in fact, actually, it's not a political discussion; it's a truthful discussion. That people matter, the
Yes.
integrity of people, and my integrity to them matters. And so approaching all of these changes, and whether it's new peer groups, new leadership teams, new teams underneath you, however which way you want to cut that, how is it that they will view me?
Yes.
What is the shadow that I leave? What is the essence of my um, core values?
Hmm.
And hold on to those. For me, that's one thing. Am I able to hold on to and I must be able to hold on to and continue to reflect my core values, which are about respect and integrity on the
Right.
one hand, but also constant curiosity, openness, dialogue, you know, the challenge is an important piece. I need to be challenged,
Mm.
but people need to be challenged in the right way.
Yes.
And then the other side of that is also, for me, again, perhaps a core value for me, but also one I think and I hope have taken through all the sort of the phases. That piece of humility that says, I do not know all the answers. In fact, the simple truth is, as I progressed up the organization, I know less. Yeah. Or is it just you realize you know less? I never knew a lot, and now it's just more apparent. But the humility to be able to say, well, if I don't know, first of all, there may well be somebody who does,
Yes.
and so I need that help. And also learn from the situation. What does it teach me? And I know for a fact that I will not get everything right. I have no problem A, admitting that, and B, also saying sorry when I know I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Because again, for me, that's about being honest with myself in those circumstances.
Yes.
Um, because I learn, honest with myself in relation to others, and at the same time, mentally learning, I won't do that again.
Hmm. Yeah.
We will
Yeah.
progress. We will progress because we have to be driven by where we need to get to. And so constant, and again, for me, also be clear about where we need to get to.
Hmm.
What are the values that we need to strive to? What are the objectives that we need to make? And to meet and reach, and be very clear about those. And you take the principles, you apply them to that, and you layer
Yes.
them on top. And for me, that's how I approach these situations. So now I'm in a very different situation, different set of peers.
Yep.
Yeah, they all know more than me.
Right.
Yeah, I can learn.
Yes.
I can
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. So there's sort of almost a triangle of keeping that beginner's mindset and
Yeah,
being very aware of that, knowing where you're going and why, but also being really clear on you know who you are and you know
yeah,
how you want to be perceived and how you want to approach it and um the as you say the shadow that you want to cast.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Um, and then I'd be really interested, and maybe this is something you do when people join UCB. So this might be something that's quite easy for you to to respond to. But in terms of sort of advice to people who are earlier in their scientific career, so perhaps when you were leaving your postdoc and joining UCB, or people walking in the door today into their first industry role, what are the things from a career perspective do you think that you know now that you would share with yourself back then, or you would share with someone walking in for their first day today?
That's a great question. Yeah, yeah. What would I tell my younger self? Um, uh, Make sure you
Hmm.
connect your network. You're not on your own. So build that, be part of and build that community around you. You need all those people. So always connect. Always connect.
Yes.
Your scientific integrity is your license to be here. So the quality of your science, never let slip once.
Okay.
Yeah. Maintain a completely open mind. The data will tell you something.
Hmm.
It will. So make sure your ears are open,
Yes.
because it may tell you what you didn't expect to hear, and that will take you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
Um, and then don't be frightened. And I guess that would be my biggest piece of advice to my younger self about actually stepping out of the comfort zone into new experiences, new roles, new things, and realize that actually, yes, you can grow into that space,
Yes.
and don't be frightened of that unknown. Would be the piece. And so, because you come with a certain knowledge package, should we say, an experience package, you can stay comfortably in that.
Hmm.
I mean, because you won't go anywhere much in that sense, but you can be super comfortable. And for
Yeah.
some people, they actually are very, very comfortable. And you know what? That's great. And we do actually need people who are comfortable
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
deliver in that space. So no criticism of that.
Yeah.
But don't be frightened about what's the other side of the hill. And I think if I were to advise my younger self, is to have embraced that faster.
Right.
And now I think I have learned that lesson now. And yeah, let's get the other side of the hill and have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then work out what you're going to do with
No,
it. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of people out there who have sort of they've allowed fear to be the driver of their career decisions, and
yeah,
that's not a great recipe for being happy about where you are, I think.
yeah, yeah. It's and I realize it's an adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. I mean, this week, UCB is Working Science Week. So we have
Hmm.
uh, 16, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, GCSE A-level students. We've got a number of them here, and they've been doing various things in the labs and so on and so forth. And that they had the unfortunate thing of me talking to them this morning. But, yeah, when I said it, I say it very genuinely. I still think it's pretty much, they pay me to have fun.
Yeah.
So doing this stuff is, for me, motivates me.
Mm,
I am stimulated by the discovery, the journey, the seeing what no one else has seen or probably hasn't seen before.
yes.
But then taking that somewhere and impacting with these observations. Oh, what's there not to like, frankly? I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, I know it might sound rather arrogant, but I still reckon I've got the best job in the world. Yeah. But in terms of, the opportunity to personal growth,
Yes.
impact for others, the real opportunity to work and shape the lives of others in a positive way,
Mm,
to contribute to their lives with their colleagues, junior colleagues, or with their patients, the external world, and so on. I still lecture.
right.
It gets this opportunity. I get that freedom to do that, but it's an opportunity to put something back with people, as well as to gain energy for oneself,
Yes.
and be part of that. So what's there not to like?
Absolutely. Uh, and I have one final question, Alistair. I'm conscious of your time, but hopefully we've got enough time for this question. You are running a research organization of significant size with scientists around the world working on different projects. And you've talked about the culture at UCB being a key part of what keeps you there. From the point of view of building a research culture, an R&D culture, or a culture within a scientific group, you've talked about transparency, being science-led, being data-driven, being open-minded. Are there any other things that you think are key to building a really productive scientific culture, or a really effective scientific culture?
I would add one more thing, I think,
Hmm.
and the real power of collaboration.
Right.
And particularly, obviously, we have a research footprint in 3 countries. I mean, the US, the UK, and in Belgium, and we have satellite sites as well. So yeah, people spread.
Yes.
We're not the largest pharma company in the world, and there are others with much more spread. But it still forces you to either have to make a choice. You either don't collaborate and you stay insular geographically, and maybe if you were really big, that is something that could be sustained. We're
Mm,
not
mm.
as UCB, and therefore to collaborate with colleagues both geographically close, but also not geographically close is
Yes.
essential. And to be able
Yes.
to communicate with your colleagues in that way, collaborate and communicate are also big parts of what builds a culture. The more you head to silos, the more your culture disappears. You will create something locally, but it won't be anywhere near what it could be. And holding that openness is really important, I think,
Hmm.
to drive a whole organization. And you can celebrate then collective success.
Yes.
Yeah, why would you not want to do that? And the success of one team is the success of all of the teams
Hmm.
together. And you hold that. And when it's tough times as well, because that's how it is, we are in there together
Yes.
to solve the problems. Because someone else may well be able to help you.
Hmm. Yeah. Fantastic. Alistair, thank you so much for your time. It's been really fascinating talking to you. There's a lot that I could have dove into in much more detail, but I was conscious that we only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tom. Real privilege. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.